Good afternoon, good Friday. Hello and welcome to our webinar demo on Emergis Accelerated Enterprise Solution for the service industry. My name is Ivan. I'm part of the Emergis marketing team and I'll be your host and moderator for today's event. Today we're going to give you a glimpse on our Emergis Accelerated Enterprise Solution for the service industry, and we'll briefly show the benefits of this solution targeted at this market segment. Now I would like to introduce our speaker, Mark Huseman, his Solution Engineering Director here at Emergis. And Mark has spent the last 20 years in the software business with the last 10 focused on SAP. In this 20 years, Mark has dealt with hundreds of prospects and customers in the manufacturing, wholesale, and services industries. Actually, before moving to the software world, Mark spent like 5 years working in a high-volume, multi-facet HVAC, automotive, and life sciences production facility with discrete process, repetitive, and project manufacturing initiatives in place. Also, Mark spent like 5 years working on an anti-submarine warfare testing government project directly out of college. And just before I turn this session over to Mark, I'd like to mention that the whole session will be recorded and everyone will receive a copy of this webinar. And since this is a brief webinar, we would appreciate if you could submit your questions to me, and if time permits, we will go over them at the end of this session. Otherwise, we will definitely email our responses back to you. As always, we expect you will find today's session, even though brief, valuable, and useful to your organization. I'll now turn control over to Mark, who will provide you a glimpse on our Emergis AES solution.
Thank you, Ivan. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. The agenda is fairly simple. I'll give you a quick one slide intro into SAP, a slide intro into Emergis, and talk about what we're going to see and how we're going to go through the demonstration, and then we'll follow up with a little bit of summarization at the end. And there's lots of different things we could talk about or look at from an SAP perspective. The most prevalent from our perspective is really looking at the pyramid and talking about where most of the SAP customer base is, which is in the 0 to 500 million range. And that is really simply, pointing out that most of SAP's customers are small to mid-level enterprises. They're not the Fortune 100s, the Fortune 500s. They're further down the food chain. And that's where Emergis plays. So that's where all our customers are. Several have moved up the pyramid over time, but most of them exist in that, or live in that lowest level of the pyramid. The other big point here is the third point on the right, and that is that SAP invests more back into research and development than most of our competitors earn in a year. So that tells you that the product just keeps getting wider and deeper. So it's another way to look at how SAP can be in so many different industries and support them so well, is because of the investment into the product over the last 42 years. A little bit about Emergis. Basically, we've been in the software business around SAP for about 17 years now. Over 220 successful implementations. Our people average about 10 years domain expertise. We are certified Center of Excellence with SAP, so we own the maintenance, and we're the first and second line of defense with issues that our prospects and customers see in the application. We are a global company, so we easily offer a follow-the-sun methodology for support. You can always get someone live with Emergis. Not always the case with our competitors or even other partners. I told you that our domain expertise is on average 10 years, but in that expertise we also own many different certifications around SAP product knowledge amongst that group of individuals who do the implementations. So that's kind of a real quick high-level view of SAP and Emergis. From a view of what Emergis bundles from a service industry perspective, it's really in the areas of financial accounting, cost controlling. Obviously, project systems is a big chunk of it, but from the project systems, we have the linkage to go buy things and store them from a materials management perspective. We have the ability to link into sales and distribution for at least billing purposes, potentially delivery services as well. So it is, project systems is tightly integrated, in the SAP environment to be able to do all those linkages. And you have total visibility between the project and wherever the link is, so it's project related. The other square there, the business intelligence, really talks about some different tool sets, right? Lumira is more of a predictive analytic tool that SAP offers in its predictive suite. Business Objects, or BobJ there, is really a grouping of tools like Crystal Reports, Analysis for Excel, and Dashboards, to name 3 of them. The entire application sits on an appliance of a HANA high-end piece of hardware, as well as a HANA database. So it can be looked at as a database. It can also be discussed as an appliance. But no business warehouse is really required here because of the appliance and the database. It is possible to be able to do real-time analysis against your data without moving everything to the business warehouse first, without any degradation in performance of the system. So between Emergis and SAP, we offer really the best of both worlds. We offer the SAP all-in-one solution, which is a scalable, best-of-breed solution that can be changed over time to handle whatever complexity you come up with in your business environment. On the other side, we can deliver it as in the cloud as almost a SaaS model. We can put it on-premise. We can do a hybrid solution. So potentially your production is on-premise, but your development and test environments are sitting out in the cloud. So very flexible. We'll work with you, and the possibilities are really endless of what we can do to help you deploy SAP in a meaningful way for your company. So we're going to go through and look at the solution and what really is delivered from I'll say project systems, project management type service environment for users in the industry. And we're going to talk a little bit about insight to action through that. SAP lets you enter a lot of data and then lets you go get that data, but it attempts to provide access to the data in an environment where you're managing by exception instead of having to look at everything to find the problems. SAP tends to push the problems to you so you can manage them and not have to look at every record, every purchase, every element within the work breakdown structure of the project that needs work. It will push those to you so you know where the issues are, where they're going to be, so you can solve them ahead of time. So we're going to jump right in now and start talking, as I said earlier, really focused around the project systems and how it interacts with the rest of SAP. And part of that is really the project structure, the work breakdown structure, which is really the hierarchy of the different elements. And we're going to look at this in the application in a minute here, but you have the ability to have as deep a structure as required with reporting elements, billing elements, progress elements. Some elements may just be for labor, some may be for material, some may be for material and labor. You can also identify which ones are going to be used for capacity planning, which ones are going to be used for billing purposes, and so forth. So very flexible, and we have the ability to identify milestones. So in a lot of cases in the service industry, you're going to deliver services over time, and you want to be able to bill for those services over time. Milestones are one way to do that, and it may be that the milestone is driven from a progress perspective. We're 20% complete, so we're going to invoice 20% of the pre-negotiated value. So that's one way we can do the milestones. Milestones can be used in different manners. That's just one of the manners they can be used in. So the project structure within SAP is relatively easy to build. I'll show you here that we can drag and drop. So I have one here already built. So you can actually copy from templates or other projects. You can drag up elements from the bottom of the grid here to the top of the grid into the actual project and build what you want. But you can see that there's summary elements and detail elements and materials all the way up. I'm actually going to grab a milestone and put it up there into the project for the form work so that I can identify when the form work is totally complete, that I'm going to do a progress analysis billing off of that. So I'm just going to provide a name for it. I'm going to identify what's going to drive it. So it's going to be progress and sales document date. So I'm going to drive through a sales document. I could, in this case, I'm going to say at 10%, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to save it. And we're basically done. So I have the ability to drag from the bottom in all the different elements of a project to create something unique for the specific business opportunity that we're providing services for. I can make that look however I want or need it to, and I can easily structure it to meet the requirements the customer provides to me. So that's the project structuring, a quick view of how that can look and feel. We can talk scheduling a little bit. SAP, like a Microsoft project, gives you the ability to have both the structure and more of a Gantt view or project visual, if you will. And you have the same kind of capabilities that you would have within a Microsoft project. And later on in the presentation, we'll actually talk about the ability to interact with a Microsoft project or another tool like that. If you are familiar with that and want to do that, you can build structures, either place and interact back and forth between SAP and the Microsoft project type of view. So give you a quick look of that and how it works. We'll go to the next view and do the same thing, just go in and take a look at it. So you can get there directly. I'm actually going to come and go from the actual project that we've already been in, we've already looked at. It's the one that I played with a minute ago. I'm going to come in and actually show you, in this case, at this level, the 3 elements for this specific summary for site preparation. I'm going to link them all or select them all, and then I'll just show you the linkage. So the second operation is linked to the first, and you can see that it has a predecessor and a successor, as does the third. Then go to more of the planning board view, or really being able to look at the project as it's exploded out in time. So you have the ability to drag and drop within this view. You have the ability to move elements around. You have the ability to actually create the links in this view just like you can in the other view. And there's a lot more you can do from this view as well. You can actually report effort at this view, and we'll look at that in a little bit. But it does give you more of that Gantt style view. You can also turn on critical path here, so you can see the critical path of the project and understand where the breakdown could be, so you know where to manage better or more tightly, as the case may be. You can also change the visibility in this view to weeks, days, months, quarters, years for the more long-term projects. So there's a lot of flexibility in this view, just like in the other view, and they're somewhat interchangeable as to what you can drive from the view. You also have the ability to define project teams by organization, by work center, the type of work they're going to do by people even, and then execute against that workforce so they can enter time, they can do their standard jobs in buying and charge their effort to the project and so forth. Can also capacity plan. Once you've defined it, you have the ability to capacity plan. So I'll give you some visibility into what we can do around setting it up. And actually, one of the keys here in SAP is having the ability to actually define who can work on it and what the skill sets required are. So it's not just saying, here's the type of people that can do the work, but it's also saying, here are the people that are assigned, and they have specific skill sets. So if I don't meet that skill set, I can't perform the work in this project. So if you start thinking about things where I have licensed heavy equipment operators, I have licensed welders, those kind of things, I can actually identify that there's a job requirement for that type of skill set, and SAP will require that certification, that skill set, to do the actual work. So there is some closed loop capabilities there if you set this up and integrated it, if you will, into the human capital management side of SAP, which is where you're going to define the skill sets. Now, you don't have to use all the human capital management within SAP. You just have to use enough to drive the capabilities and the teaming aspect of it here so you can identify the workforce. So minimal layout gives you a lot of great things in the project and allows you to manage it in a different manner than you may be able to do today. From a procurement perspective, SAP allows you to buy to the project, and we'll look at that in a minute. It allows you to buy to stock and then allocate from stock to the project. So every time it does that, it's moving the cost. In the first scenario, when that PO is generated, a purchase rec, the purchase order are generated, the project information is dragged along in those objects, the purchase rec, purchase order. So when a goods receipt comes back, when the PO is released, the goods receipt comes back, the invoice is generated to payment, all those different opportunities flow back into the project at different phases of the life cycle. So you have total visibility in the project as to what's created. If you buy to stock, you don't have visibility until you've actually done the allocation from stock to the project. And that's a software allocation, but it is then hard pegged to the project and would have to be unpegged to be used somewhere else. So there is that kind of capability. There's a project-oriented material requirements planning session, and you end up with a detail that shows you everything that's been planned to the project. So I can manage fully within the project. I can buy everything to the project. I have total visibility into the stock, into the issues I have with procurement, the issues I may have in manufacturing to produce something for the project. So and this is a real differentiator when you look at Microsoft Project, because Microsoft Project doesn't do anything with material in a live manner. SAP, it's just another phase of the project. It's totally integrated with the whole materials management piece, and you get all the value of that directly into the project. So to give you some visibility into that, we'll come in. And I tried to be really consistent here, driving the project always the same way to give you visibility. We're going to scroll down. There's 3 different elements that are material elements here, all around the concrete for the form work. And I went to the detail here, just highlighted a couple things. The quantity, that was a purchase requisition for the network. It's cost relevant, so I want the cost to come in. And then I'm actually going in and drilling down to the actual purchase requisition that's linked. And you can see there that I've highlighted, there's the project and the element that the purchase requisitions actually link to. So I told you that this information's dragged along, if you will, to the requisition, to the purchase order. So as it progresses through its life cycle through goods receipt, release, goods receipt, invoice creation, invoice payment, all that information is fed back directly to the project at all the time. So you always have the most up-to-date view in the project itself. So that's the project procurement piece. From a material perspective, you also have the ability to copy bills of materials from a production environment, if you will, into the project and then modify them within the project. So you can do a same as but type of view. You know, I need the same structure, but this one part's going to come out and a different part's going to go in type thing, or except for. So you have those kind of capabilities as well. Now from a cost perspective, you have a lot of flexibility here as well. So, you know, I told you that the cost is going to come in from the purchase order. If I'm doing production orders, that cost will come in. If I do any service delivery from an installation perspective, as an example, I can have that come in as well. The invoicing side is going to bring the revenue in. So then I'll be able to compare the cost to the revenue. I have as many different overhead roll-up structures as you could want, so I can identify how I want to drive cost into really price, my loaded cost values. So that's a piece of this as well. You see the second bullet talks about easy cost planning. So there's actually a cost calculator in here, and there's an adding machine image there to try and give you that kind of visibility to that tool. So we'll talk about that, and we're going to look at that in the budgeting side in a little while. But you have the ability to do top-down or bottom-up costing. Most people do it. I can't say that. We see a pretty good mix. Some will have the lowest level elements capture all the cost, and then it's rolled up at the summary level. Some will put it at the summary and execute it downwards. So we're going to have 1,000 hours for this summary, and we're going to split that 5 ways into 200 hours each, or some other mix, into the lower level actual cost elements that are going to accrue the cost. So there's flexibility there all the way around the system. And then there's a cost view here. There's about 20 different views of cost in the system. I picked this one because it gives you a little more, right? It's not just cost. It'll show you the revenues, expenditures, receipts, all in one view. It will also let you do comparisons over time in this view as well. There are planned to budget to actuals, plan, budget, forecast to actual. There's lots of different views like that where you can do comparisons to see how you're actually executing within the project. So this one specifically, as we go through, I'm just executing this against a whole project. I could have been more specific. You can see it by year. You can see the plans versus the actual cost, revenue, expenditures, and I really only have cost, planned, and actual. I have the ability to look at other aspects of this as well, and I didn't really want to do the transaction in currency, but that's okay in case you have a multi-country project that you're working on. You could actually look at it and see where the revenue was coming in or the cost in the different currencies. But you actually have the drill down here to the different types. So actual activity allocation, costs that came through postings from either labor or purchase order goods receipts, and then some standard costing input for the actual planned. So you have visibility to what's driving the cost, not just the costs themselves, by doing this type of drill down. Revenues on the other side. So we talked about costs. Now revenues a little bit. They're going to be driven through a sales order billing environment. And they could be based on actual resource consumption. They could be based on planned resource consumption in more of a milestone billing type activity, progress billing type activity. So there's different levels here that you can really decide how you're going to drive billing. So it can be executed off, based, like I said, on the milestones. It could be project sales order type where I can just say, I've accrued costs this month, I'm going to bill. So it could be just on a periodic basis. It could also just be based on resource related. And it could be that you have a mix of these within one project and you're driving it at the different summary elements, how you're going to drive revenue. But in each case, they're going to drive through sales and distribution, and they're going to drive revenue in that way. So generate an invoice with the appropriate amount of detail required. That invoice will be paid by the customer, and it will flow directly into the project. So you would now have the revenue side of it built in as well. From a budgeting perspective, you do have the ability to budget at different levels. So again, you can do it at the summary element, you can do it at the detail element. Up to you. I'll show you both here in a minute. And there's multiple ways to budget. I can budget within the project, which is what I'll show you. There's also a budgeting screen where you can create the project and then just come in and budget outside of it, if you will. Just basically call up a structure view and apply the budget that way. Typically that's done if it's going to be a top-down, where the one I'll show you, you could do top-down or bottom-up. So it's a little more flexible. You can have multiple versions of the budget. Let's face it, over time, budgets change because costs change. You find out more detail, and you have to rebudget. So SAP allows you to do that and control that. You can then compare actuals against whichever budget you want to. The current budget, the original budget, some interim budget. So there's flexibility there as well. So you get the whichever level of detail you're really looking for, SAP supports it. To give some visibility into that, we'll come in and go through the same exercise that we've been doing. And we're going to explode it. We're going to go to the easy cost planning icon there. You see I have one version of this. I have a specific costing variant assigned, and that costing variant can actually provide overheads like I talked before. You can see here's the top level at all the summaries. Here's a summary and the detail that makes up that summary. So I went in a couple of those. But you can see at each element level, I have different amounts, and I've set those up at the cost element level, and I've set those up as variable costs. So you have the ability to have different types of costs. So I could even identify overheads at this level if I wish to. So it can be material, it can be labor, it can be overhead, it could be some other indirect cost. So these can be very robust. It just doesn't have to be material and labor. Most common, material and labor, but it does provide the ability to go different places. And actually, if you look down on the left, you'll actually see if I went down one more, there's a purchase overhead there as well. So, and I can't get back there with that on. There's a purchase overhead at the very bottom of the list, so that was either entered as an overhead or calculated as an overhead. Options. And then from a payment, so if I've executed the revenue side, as we discussed through sales and distribution, as the payments occur and as I have to pay, so coming in, going out, I can look at the cash management of the project as well. So it's not just that I have visibility to revenue and I have visibility to what my costs are. I can actually do a cash flow view of the project. So I've got enough information and enough detail to do that and then drill down into it to see. And if it's a longer term project, I can start looking at interest calculations as well. So the project I showed you is a multi-year. I'm going to have potentially interest accrued yearly or quarterly, and I can actually execute that through SAP to do that transaction for me, do that roll-up, so I have that visibility all in one tool and have that visibility over time. I don't have to use Microsoft Project or Primavera, whatever the case is, and Excel to manage my business. I can do it all in one tool. Also have the ability to manage claims within SAP, link these claims to the project. So they can be claims around cost, price, status, whatever. It gives me the ability to manage every exception brought up by the customer against the project in an easy way, and I can see the cost impact because we can use that easy cost planning tool to look at changes. So I talked about being able to rebudget. Well, if I rebudget based on some impact to the schedule, the deliverables of the project, I'm probably going to have an impact on the actuals as well. So I have the ability to do a claim, think of claim as a change request. So I can price that or cost that claim request, that change request in a claim, and present it to the customer for buy-off. So it's a way to do change management within SAP against the project. And then you can see at the top right, it gives you some visibility into the different type of people that are involved and what you can manage. So it's not just about cost. It could be about document management, document assignment between the two, us and them type activities. Any us and them type activity between you and the customer can be managed as a claim or a change. And this brings up another point that I haven't covered yet, but there is a full document management system as part of SAP. So the whole design and drafting side of the project can also be rolled into the project and captured as far as time and cost. So that doesn't have to be something outside the project. It doesn't have to be something that is really nebulous. You can actually link the documents that were created for the project as part of the project. So you can capture the deliverable as well as the effort, the cost, and the price all in one place. So that's the claim side, or maybe the better way to say it is the change time. And we've done all this work. We've done the budget. We've done all the work. We've built the structure. We've gone and bought some material. We haven't done anything about labor reporting yet. So I want to talk about labor reporting. I'll give you two views of how this can be done. One is actually executing within the project. I talked about that a little while ago when I showed the timeline of the project. The other one is more of a timesheet entry where you just identify where you're reporting your work to. And I told you before that I can type both of these out where I have to be authorized and assigned, or assigned and potentially authorized to do the work against that project element. If not, and the project element also has to be released. So if it's released but I'm not assigned, I can block and not let people report against it. If it's released and that person's assigned, but they don't have the skill set, they could be assigned as part of the team. If it requires a skill, if they don't have it, they can't report against it. So there's different levels of authorization you can identify there to allow someone the ability to report. So I talked about the human relations or human capital management side of it before. You have to roll out a little piece to be able to do some of that, but the rest of it is pretty standard. So I've actually captured two different ways in this view that I'm executing here. I did the first one in the project just to show you can. So I can do it from this view. I can do it from the project planning view, planning board. So I come in here, I identify the element I want to report on, and I go up and confirm activity. So I could fill in the information required here as how much labor I'm reporting, and you see that the total's there too, what the forecast is. So that's one method. The other method is to actually go to a different transaction and report it. So there's a profile for projects. It's got my personnel number, and I can come in here and say this is regular time against this project. It could be time and a half, it could be a double time, whatever it is. That's the activity type. I enter it, I save it, and I'm now accrued, in this case, 8 more hours against that project element. So that activity type has a cost associated with it. In this case, it's $25. So every hour that I enter, that 8 hours I just did, charge $200 against the project. It could also then get overhead applied. So just keep that picture in mind. It's not just entering time. It could be entering time and having that time extrapolate into a higher value by doing the overheads. So that's the time. Progress tracking, progress analysis, milestone trend analysis. I'll give you some visibility into this, the cost to complete calculations. So you can do earned value within SAP. You can do cost to complete, full progress tracking, milestone trend analysis, and so on and on. And one of the reports that we're going to look at, you'll actually see the milestone trend analysis view in a report. There's also the ability to look across projects in SAP. So not just live within one project, but I may be managing multiples, and I need to be able to see what's happening in all of them. I might be sharing resources, or I might be a shared resource across projects. So when I'm looking at staffing projects and things like that, it's important that I see where they're already booked, what time they have available, so I can negotiate if need be, or I can just assign them to my project. So across projects, there's different hierarchy structures you can apply. So I can look at it by type of project, type of organization, type of skill set, those kinds of things when I come in to do the project views. I talked about this a little bit before about being able to manage within SAP, but there's also functionality in the OpenPS interaction or interface that you can have from SAP that allows me to go from Microsoft Project to SAP Project Systems or vice versa. And I can push from one to the other. I can make changes in one and have it display and saved so that it's visible in the other system. So there is a lot of flexibility here where you can still have management within SAP, but I'll say some execution or visibility outside of SAP in a tool you may already own, being Microsoft Project. You don't have to adapt everybody to the SAP software. You can just adapt the people that are going to be executing within it, but you can give visibility to many more people in the same reports they have today. They're just being fed by SAP now. So there's flexibility around that. I also talked about it. It's not just Microsoft Project. It is Primavera, Artemis. There are options out there as far as how you do it. The other aspect of this, I talked about cash flow analysis. You can also do profitability analysis. So I can compare my costing side of the business to my revenue side of the business and look how profitable the project is at any point in time. So I don't have to wait till the project's closed to do this. I can look at this, you know, a month into a 5-year project or a month into a 6-month project. So part of it is looking at earned value, but the other part is it going to be profitable? And if I can tell right away it's not, I probably want to do something to try and adjust it so it will be profitable. But I certainly don't want to wait till the end of the project to find out I lost money. I want to find out as soon as possible if I have an issue so I can try to adjust and make sure that in the end it was a profitable endeavor. So I don't just learn something from the project, I learn and earn something from the project. So I did put in some of the reports. This starts to give some visibility into capacity over the lifetime of a project. I have the ability to look at progress tracking over time. SAP is very good about providing visibility. I talked about this at the very beginning. A management by exception. The red ones are where I have to focus my time. The green ones are okay type thing. Here is another view of planning and capacity projects across the work centers where the work's going to be performed by the different skill sets. So the bottom one is really the pool of work to be done, and the top is where the work can be done, and I'm going to allocate from the bottom to the top. Start to get into workforce planning. You can see by person, by skill, the total work, when it's scheduled to be done, summarizations of that. So this starts to give me visibility into who's available. This is a view of availability. I can come in and change the costing. So this is that other view. I showed you a view for budgeting cost. Here's another one to actually build the cost plan or the budget. This one's in euros. So I already talked about multi-currency, but it was only US dollars. So this gives you visibility that you can do multi-currency in SAP. If you're unaware of that, definitely is an option. I talked about the project-oriented procurement, project-oriented MRP, material requirements planning. This starts to give a visibility into that window. So this is a screen. I just showed you that I could go back to the purchase requisition. This screen lets me look at, you know, where the orders are in life, which ones have issues. I can look at stock. I can look at deliveries coming in. I can look at quantities and dates. So it gives me total visibility to everything against this project. So if I live within the project and I have buyers within the project, they live here. They don't live in, I'll say, standard material requirements planning. And the time they'd have visibility to that is if they're going to allocate something from general stock to the project. So it does give you the ability to manage everything within the project, which is what I've been talking about kind of all along. Another view to progress tracking over time. So I can come in here and start to enter the percentage of completion. So in many cases, that's an enterable field. In some cases, it's a calculated field. So this gives some visibility into being able to enter that. Another view to do the same type of thing. So there's typically more than one way to do things in SAP, so you just saw two to do the same type of thing. Here's a milestone trend analysis comparing the final billing to the cycles of down payment and a partial bill of 30%. So you start to get visibility to your, not just a trend, but how your revenue looks over time. So you should see the peak because we're at 40%, and then when we're going to get the next couple of payments throughout that cycle. So that's a lot of project systems, a little bit of financials and cost controlling, some discussion about sales and distribution, some materials management, and a couple of the views. And we haven't really touched on the business intelligence yet. So we're going to come to that in a minute here. But really, why the accelerated enterprise solution for services from Emergis? you know, we typically see these kind of aspects from people who implement this footprint of SAP. Increased revenue because they have better visibility into how they're running their business in one tool. They have the ability to provide service in a quicker manner. Again, they have all the decision-making tools in one place. They're totally integrated, so they have the big picture all the time. They become more profitable because of the first two things, right? Including resource management. I have better visibility as to who's underutilized, overutilized, not utilized at all, and it tells me where I should start growing my skill set so I can more accurately utilize my people. Obviously, it supports complexity. You can build very simple things in in the project systems. You can do very complex things, you know, building ships, aircraft. And it gives you the ability to improve relationships with your customers because you're going to be able to bid better. You're going to be able to satisfy their inquiries in a quicker manner. You're going to be able to execute the billing and the justification for the billing in a very conscious and civilized manner. We are able to offer this from an Emergis perspective in a quick time frame, 90 days time frame implementation with a couple different user interfaces, some pre-configured reports and analytics, that business intelligence side, which I'm going to hit next. We provide online training, and I'll give you visibility into the best practice procedures or scenarios that we would typically deliver. And we can do this all at a very affordable per seat per month solution cost. Here's a list of the scenarios that we would typically deliver. Doesn't have to be the all-exhaustive list, but it gives you a pretty good idea of a typical footprint. There might not be any service. Typically, when you start talking scenarios for service, there's two levels of it. One is more the project type services, which is the bottom half and the top. The other one is more service management from a repair, refurbishment, exchange and swap type environment, which is this piece. So, which is a different webinar at a different time. There are reports outside of the ones I already showed you. There's a bunch more that are in the core application. These are the ones that we deliver from a business intelligence perspective in Crystal and dashboards, and they hit the rest of the product. This starts to give you some visibility into how some of those look. So Crystal reports are not just textual, they can have graphics in them as well. So this was just to give you a representation of a couple different ones with those graphics. There's also dashboards, and I just broke out a couple. This one's more about product costing and being able to move the dials and see the impact on margin. Maybe not the best fit for a project-oriented, but I can start to look at my, we could do something similar to this for projects where I can look at my value analysis from my cost and my revenue. So another way to adjust and say, you know, if I knock my labor costs down X%, what would be the profit impact? Also have a high level of visibility across most of the standard measures that a CEO is interested in. And every one of these has a plan and actual, as well as showing the trend. And each one of these has a detailed, this is a dashboard, but each one has a Crystal report underneath with the details. So the CEO can go to the detail level if they want to. They also have the ability just to look at it from a high level and make the phone call to get the detail from their direct report. So that's it from me doing the demo dump on you. I'll leave this up there, and I'll pass it back to Ivan in case we got any questions, and we can do some. We've got a few minutes left, just under 10. So if there's some questions, Ivan, that we want to go through, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mark. Great, Mark. Let's do that. Thank you for the insight on the solution. And also, please feel free to submit your questions. And if you don't have any questions right now, and anyone come up with something in the future, please email this to marketing@emergis.com. Right now, we have some questions already been submitted, Mark. We can wait here just a couple of seconds in order to get some more, or we can start right away.
Let's just start right away and see if any more pop in.
Okay, great. So the first one we have here will be, we use Microsoft Project to manage our projects today. Does SAP interface with this tool? I think you mentioned some of that.
Yeah, I did mention this a couple times throughout. One of the last detailed slides talked about the OpenPS, the Open Project Systems piece, which is a piece of middleware that allows us to interact between SAP's project systems and Microsoft Project or Primavera, and allows for two-way data flow between the two tools.
Great. Okay, I think the answer is there. The second question that we have here is, do we always have to build from scratch when we start a new project?
So that's a good question. You certainly can. SAP allows you to copy from an existing project. It allows you to copy pieces from existing projects. If you recall, I actually dragged up a milestone into my project as one of the first things I did. That was just a piece. I could have dragged up the entire project and tweaked it and saved it as something else. There's also the ability to have templates. So if I have, my whole business is doing service projects, and I have 3 or 4 major types of those projects, I could create a template for each one and then just start with that template and then execute, make the changes as required, save it, and I have now a unique instance to report against.
Great. Okay, Mark. And the third question that we have here is in terms, and we're asking if you can please explain a little bit more on how the material portion of the project works.
Sure. So you can identify existing material, inventory parts, if you will, as part of the project. And that's what I showed. The 3 I had were actually existing. And then you can identify how they're going to be executed. So in mine, they all created a requisition from the project specifically. You can also copy a bill of material into the project and then modify it as required if you need to modify it at all. It could be that it's built outside of the project and then transfer the cost in. So options there. You can really do a little bit of combination of those two. It may be that you build something and bring it in some instances. In other instances, you explode the structure into the project, if you will, the bill of material structure into the project, and then manage it all individually. You also have the ability to wow, I just had a moment. So we'll stop there. Sorry. I was going to say something else and it left me. So
don't worry. I think it's understood up to this point. We have here a really specific question from one of our attendees, which is it's telling us that their projects are typically long-term and they need to build periodically during the project's lifetime. How does SAP manage this?
So we talked about this a little bit as well. There's different methods for billing from the project. In a lot of cases, people will use milestones and drive the billing from the milestone. So as a milestone hits a percentage of completion, of earned value, whatever the case may be, we can actually drive an invoice through sales and distribution to the customer. As that happens, the project manager is involved, so he or she's going to approve it to occur. You can pass whatever level of detail you want from the project to sales and distribution for the invoice. And then you'd have visibility to that invoice information within the project, and as payment occurs, that would update the project as well as revenue, so you'd see that. And you'd be able to report against that whenever you want. You then have visibility to the cash flow for the project, and you have visibility to the revenue recognition at the project. So you, again, can live within the project and manage it almost like a business in itself.
Okay, great. Okay, and our final question here, Mark, is how does SAP Project interact with the rest of the SAP system?
So we looked at some of it. I talked about the sales side a couple times, sales and distribution, where we're going to do the billing. So we're using that infrastructure to do that. I showed the requisition that was generated from the project directly into materials management. We also talked about being able to do production orders in the same fashion. So that brings in materials management and production planning. I talked about the fact that there is a project material requirements planning piece as well. So it kind of takes the best of both worlds, if you will. It takes the best of what's already there from a materials management planning perspective, and it makes it project oriented. So again, I can live within my project as much as I need to or want to. So companies that have buyers outside the projects would still see everything that they need to buy. They would not even have to notice that there's a project number on it. They just do their job as normal, and the information will flow back to the project. Same with production. If they get an order, it can just be another order in the mix of what their weekly task is or daily task is. They execute it as normal, but everything flows back to the project. So they don't even have to have visibility. People have a mixed mode where some works project, some is more commercial, if you will. The employees don't even need to realize what they're working on. They just do their job as normal, and everything flows back to the project as required. So SAP's project systems really allows you to live in either one or both of those worlds at the same time, and effectively gives you the tool to do that. Any more, Ivan?
No, I don't think so. So these are all the questions that we've gathered from today's session, Mark. Is there anything else that you would like to add or any final message to our audience on this?
I'd just like to thank everybody for, listening in, attending. I expect to have a better feel for what, SAP's project systems does and can do for them, as well as some of the value add that Emergis brings to the table when we package and roll out the accelerated enterprise solution for service industries.
Great. Well, again, Mark, thank you very much for your insight on today's session. Thanks a lot to our audience for the time provided, and we'll go ahead and conclude today's presentation. You will get a quick poll on this event, so please help us fill that in order to improve on our efforts. Thanks all for attending today's session. Thank you, Mark, again, and hope you'll have a great rest of the week and weekend.